Hi there. This is going to be the first video in a series where I just wanted to talk about different tech picks for various decks or archetypes. They're just going to be things that I've either thought of or come across online that I think looks kind of fun, like a card you can fit into some existing strategy, or a few cards you can use to add like an extra combo line to an existing deck. Um, they're not going to be intended to be meta or competitive in any way. They really are just things that I think are fun. They're probably going to hurt the consistency of the deck, be like difficult to pull off basically, but when you do, it's kind of exciting. The first card I want to talk about is a tech pick for one of my favorite new archetypes, which is Exosister. I think they're kind of a fun deck. They weren't very strong when they first came out. They needed a lot of help, so this is kind of just a fun tech pick to throw into there. They got a lot stronger recently with Magnifica coming out and Dimension Force, and in about a month in Power of the Elements, they're going to get Malfa, which is just an absolutely insane card for the consistency of the deck, which is basically the biggest problem of it right now. But for that next month or so, the deck needs some help. I think a super fun card to add to the strategy is Quintet Magician. First of all, it is one of the coolest looking cards in the game. So let's start with what's good about adding this card into an Exosister deck. First of all, it's a huge body. That's something that the Exosisters don't have. All the main deck monsters are like a couple hundred attack and defense, basically. Even the strongest extra deck monster right now is 2,800. Before that, it was 2,500 before Magnifica came out. So that's like a big bonus. Sometimes you just can't get over a big body. You need to do that. He's got 4,500 attack and 4,500 defense. That's pretty nice. Also, it has pretty good protection. It can't be tributed, so no kaiju. It can't be used as fusion material, so especially in a format where a super poly is running around or branded banishment, it's protected from all of that, and it can't be destroyed by card effects. So it has three pretty nice pieces of protection, but the coolest thing about it that makes it like actually an exciting, fun thing to pull off, to actually summon, is if this card is fusion summoned using 5 spellcaster monsters with different names, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. That's just super fun. A board wipe is always fun, even if it's not easy to pull off. Now, one little neat piece of, I wouldn't call it synergy, but really just a way that this doesn't get in the way of your current strategy is the way you want to summon this is going to be Magicalized Fusion. The Exosisters, sort of by design, don't use the graveyard. They don't recur resources from there. It is a big weakness, but at some point you're just going to have a bunch of stuff in the graveyard you're not doing anything with. That's where Magicalized Fusion comes in. It lets you fusion summon a spellcaster monster by banishing fusion materials from your field or your graveyard. So at some point you're going to have a bunch of your main deck Exosisters in the graveyard, and you can just drop this and pull out a huge monster. So now let's talk about the downsides. There are some pretty big ones. They're pretty obvious. One of those downsides is the summoning requirement. It takes 5 spellcaster monsters, which is crazy. You're not going to get that on turn 1. In this deck, it does not churn resources like that, so you do not want to see this in your opening hand. But you do want to see it at some point, right? Verte recently got banned, so you can't just, summon 2 Exosisters, go into that to get 2 Magicalized Fusion. So you're kind of at this sort of conflicting point where you don't want to see it early, so you don't want to play 3 whole copies of it, but then you do want to see it, like you need to hard draw it, so you kind of also want to play 3 copies. There is a way around this that I'll talk about at the end of the video, but for right now, yeah, without Verte, this is just totally bunk. You do not want to see this card until you can just play it. You don't want it as a dead card in your hand, but to play it, you need 5 spellcasters in the graveyard. Ideally with different names. So that's like part of why it's actually super difficult to pull off. Another downside is there is already an obviously significantly better option called Zeus. It is obviously the Exosisters are an Xyz deck. You're gonna play Zeus in it. It's just too good not to play, and it does just a better version of this. Technically, it has less attack points than Quintet Magician, less defense, but it's a big guy that sends instead of destroys. I guess technically Zeus also sends your own cards, which is a bummer. Such a better card, so much easier to summon to, which is the biggest thing that really is making Quintet Magician not that good. And finally, you may have noticed that I've been saying 5 spellcasters with different names, but the Exosisters have 4 spellcasters with different names. Obviously, you'll play more than 5, so you can still get it out, but if you only play Exosister monsters, you're not going to get the board wipe, which again is the cool part of this card. That's makes it fun to pull off. So what can we do about that? So we're looking for some cards that include at least one spellcaster with a different name from our Exosisters. Ideally something that will synergize with the deck, but that can always happen. There is a big difference between synergizing and just not getting in the way of your current strategy. And hopefully something that can like make up for the weaknesses of the deck right now. Because right now the main deck for the Exosisters isn't super strong. Again, the monsters are super weak. They're really only about getting to the Xyz monsters. Spells and traps are okay. But we want something that can actually sort of enhance that. What if we can't get to those Xyz monsters? We want something that's still going to give us a line of play. And to me, that screams Dogmatica. We have level 4 spellcasters, so we can even use them as materials for Xyz summons. They have a super solid like main deck plays. They special summon themselves so they can extend, and they give us options, access to other things like sending Intis to the graveyard so that we can get more destruction. They just add a lot of good stuff. So we look at what we have access to here. We have Ecclesia, obviously. You're going to want to play Fleur-de-Lis, not a level 4, still spellcaster, solid synergy there with Ecclesia. Maximus is also pretty good, especially if you're summoning Magnifica and using the banish effect. You have to send your material to the graveyard. So there, you can easily summon Maximus and then use this effect and just kind of mess up someone else's extra deck. Just a solid piece of main deck support. You can also throw in Adin and Theo. They both act as extenders, not nearly as good. You don't really see people playing them, but they're level 4 spellcasters. They're more names. They work. Obviously, you're going to play Nadir Servant too. It's a good card that's going to let you search something out. It's going to let you send something from the extra deck to the graveyard. So if you have something like Intis, that's fantastic. Send it to the graveyard, get an extra destruction while you're searching stuff out. The obvious downside here is that a lot of these things are going to lock you out of special summoning from the extra deck. So you're going to need to get one Xyz out first, and then you can start going into these other plays. Which is actually why I personally, when I play this at locals, I don't use Dogmatic Punishment, because that's going to lock you out on your own turn the next turn from Xyz summoning. So, and I kind of, generally when I'm playing this, I want it to be more of an Exosister deck that's sort of being supported by something else as opposed to like a real mashup of any two strategies. So that right there, that's already up to 5 different names, 3 of which are level 4 spellcasters to use as material. That gives you more than enough names, so 5 plus 4 is 9 names. Also, you need hand traps. Effect Veiler is a spellcaster. That's a 10th name right there. This deck has plenty of access to more level 4 spellcaster monsters to make it easier to actually get into a Quintet Magician that gets its board wipe. We talked about how it's possible to actually still get the board wipe reasonably. We're going to get back to actually getting to the fusion spell. Again, we don't have Verte, we can't just do that anymore, but if we're playing the Dogmatica cards, multiple of them are going to make us send a card from the extra deck to the graveyard. And a lot of cards have beneficial effects when you send them from the extra deck to the graveyard, including a more recent card with an effect that I always forget about, which is Albalinotis the Abyss Dragon. It does all of its contact fusion stuff, but also, once per turn during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, add a Polymerization normal spell or Fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. So if you Nadir Servant to send this to the graveyard, then you can get 2 Magialized Fusion at the end phase. So that then on your next turn, if you're lucky enough to get enough in the graveyard, you can summon it. Also, you can have another spellcaster monster in your extra deck so that when you use Maximus, you get to send this guy and a spellcaster. So that just kind of pads the graveyard there. So yeah, that's Quintet Magician and kind of how I think the best way to integrate it into an Exosister deck is. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video, and let me know, are there any other like cool tech picks for the Exosister deck either now or after Malfa comes out with Power of the Elements? Or is there like can you think of a better way to sort of integrate Quintet Magician into this deck? Or is there another deck that you think Quintet Magician fits into well, that other than a Dark Magician fusion deck? It's a super cool card. Always looking for places to put it where that 5 unique name spellcaster requirement is less of a huge downside than it already is. Yeah, thanks. Hope you have a good day.